It's rare these days to find something that's over 80 years old, designed for defence, ultimately temporarily, still as intact as this. It's rare these days to find something that's over 80 years old, designed for defence, ultimately temporarily, still as intact as this. This is the Strendur 12-pounder battery on the Faroe Islands. It sits on one side of the entrance to Skala Fjord, which was an escort refuelling base. On the opposite side was a 5.5-inch battery with 2 guns. And here we had 2 12-pounders, quick-firing guns for engaging fast-moving craft. And when I say it's relatively intact and untouched, I don't say that lightly. We're just walking up towards number 2 gun emplacement, which is almost unchanged from when it was constructed. We have number 2 searchlight emplacement, which same again is almost untouched, now in a pretty poor state of repair. Just behind me we have the magazine with twin issuing hatches, one for number 2 gun and one for number 1 gun. The number 1 emplacement has been modified. The roof has been taken off, a modern roof has been put on, and the aperture at the front blocked up. And then we have the battery observation post just behind the 2 gun emplacements. And this whole village during the war, this whole area of the village was really dominated by the military camp that was here. There were barrack blocks, canteens, offices, as well as other defensive structures, including the later introduction of an unrotated projectile emplacement, which I'm yet to find. So let's have a look around and see some of this preservation. So the roof on these was, I think it was called basically plastic armour. So it was a combination of tar and beach gravel that was put together on a steel backing plate. Quite often emplacements like this would have had solid block concrete roofs, but I presume for economy, and there must also have been some benefits to using this plastic armour. But as you can see, the roof is held entirely by these steel beam uprights, and we can see those plastic armour tiles. And I say tiles because they are in fact individual. It hasn't been poured as an entire roof section. So there's the joint between 2 of the tiles, and see them again there. We have the join, and actually if we go up on the roof we can just see how the plastic and the steel, as the steel has lost integrity and the plastic is sagged, it started to ripple. And a lot of these emplacements in the UK have been taken down, demolished, destroyed, especially the roof in particular, what I'm talking about. So it's really, really rare to have that here. In fact, I don't know of another intact plastic armour roof in the UK, not that I've visited yet. So here we are inside the pretty much untouched 12-pounder emplacement. To your left, as you look out to the sea, that is up to Skala Fjord. So it's a deep water fjord that is pretty well protected, both from the weather but also strategically. So we have this twin 12-pounder battery here. On the far side of the river, as I say, we have a 5.5-inch battery just slightly further up the coast. This large mound in front of us is the island of Nólsoy, and that is just opposite the capital of Tórshavn. The gap here is the northern entrance into the fjord, and then on the other side of it is the southern approach into the fjord. So as well as being sheltered from the weather, as I say, it's pretty well protected strategically. So let's get onto the emplacement itself. We can see the steel uprights and beams that support that plastic armour roof continue inside. Strengthened, or not even just strengthened, but held up, not at the very front of the emplacement, but held up in the middle by this I-beam in the middle. We've got ready-use ammunition lockers on both sides. One of the lockers here shows that it probably would have had wooden shutters on these doors, because we were talking about single self-contained rounds of ammunition as opposed to separate projectiles and propellant charges, whereas the wood on the other side has now completely gone. And the emplacement itself, or the holdfast I should say, so here's the holdfast, still in situ at the front of the emplacement, with 6 large bolts. I wouldn't even hazard a guess of what diameter those are in imperial measurements, of course. But the holdfast still remains, and the second emplacement over there with the second gun. This is number 2 emplacement, number 1 to the right, as we look out. So really, what a gem of an emplacement. It was only really some batteries like this on Orkney that I've seen this level of preservation. Those I don't think had plastic armour roofs. I think they all had concrete roofs, most of which are still there. Not much to see on number 1 emplacement. As I say, the roof has been taken down. It was in a dangerous state apparently. Was taken down and was piled up at the front of the emplacement. And it's currently in use as a bit of a farm store. So we're not going to go in there. And here we are at the front of number 1 emplacement. And that's, just as I was mentioning, that's the plastic armour which has been removed from the roof here, piled up in front. And it gives us a better appreciation of the tiles that they were made up in. So we have the steel inner roof, if you like, and then we have the plastic armour. And I'm not sure if these were intended, if these were in fact covered with grass as well. It's highly likely that they were, both to give extra protection from shrapnel or anything coming down from the sky, but also to add camouflage from the air. And I've often wondered about the camouflage from the air, sort of thinking, well, surely they knew the emplacements were here. And in fact, yes, you know, when we see aerial photographs of sites like this, we see emplacements marked, we see gun batteries and so on. But it's the camouflage from the bombers and the fighters at that particular time, at night or even day raids, who were coming in. They needed to find their target So it was really to hide it from them. So we have the magazine here. Magazine's also been used as a store. I was speaking to the owner who gave me permission to be here, and he said it was fine to go in and have a look. So we will do that. Although it's filled with hay and some tools and so on. So there's not a huge amount, to see up close. So relatively simple magazine, and as I say, it was all cased or cartridged ammunition, so it could all be stored in the one place. It's likely there would have been different natures of ammunition, so different warheads, if you like, especially if it was in use against fast-moving patrol craft as well as potentially aircraft as well. So that was the small magazine. Just need to make sure we do it all up again. So I think the best place for us to go next is number 2, searchlight emplacement. So I'll navigate my way across the field and pick you up over there. And what a gem of an emplacement this is. After the war, quite often with economy measures in place, whenever sites were handed back to landowners, they stripped as much as they could out, and metal was very valuable at the time. So much of the metal work around other batteries has been removed, has been scrapped. This emplacement, however, retains all of its original metalwork, now in a pretty poor state. Chatting to the owner of part of the battery, he was saying about 15 years ago they had approached the government to see if anything could be done about preserving this, but unfortunately nothing was to come of that, and it's just fallen into a great state of decay. But apparently those 15 years ago, it was the doors were still sliding in the rails. It still was effectively fully functional. I've only seen another one really with the metalwork like this down around, was it around Dover? Certainly around Folkestone, I think, in the southeast of England. But this has more metalwork still intact. And interestingly, I've not noticed this on any of the other sites before, but obviously it was a standard feature. So we have this, I'm not sure if it's copper, or maybe it was bronze, but a non-ferrous strip that is on the edges of the doors, that I think the latches, whenever the shutters were shut, the latches would have engaged into. And each door here, reasonably complicated. Each door had its own set of grooves. Or there was a pair, I suppose. There was a left side and a right side. Had the pair of grooves. So the rails for these are really quite complicated and deteriorate pretty quickly. And there's the handle for opening and shutting. We have the main doors, although this is one of the emplacement shutters as opposed to the main door. Hinges on one side still intact, hinges on the other have given out, and the door has collapsed off. And here we are inside, probably still with the original whitewash colour scheme. And like most of these, there was a partition, it seems. So you'd have had crew quarters in here, and we can see the stove pipe where they've been able to keep warm. And that's this bit is painted white, and then we'd have had the partition and the main emplacement to the front. And all of these, it's sometimes interesting. There are a few different patterns of emplacements, and sometimes they get mistaken for observation or lookout posts. One tell is the ventilation hole at the very top there. So these were carbon arc lamps. So they literally burnt through an arc of or carbon rod, and it was as electricity, as the carbon rod was the electrode, that gave off a lot of smoke as it burnt off. So searchlight emplacements have a hole which is central, especially some of the square emplacements often get mistaken as lookout posts. What an emplacement, and it continues to be a really fascinating sight. And this did indeed, the searchlight emplacements did indeed have grass on the roof, and this was common practice. To add camouflage, there's the top of the stovepipe. To add that camouflage from the air. And of course, once the searchlight is in operation, you can't camouflage it, because if you're on target, you're effectively blinding your opponent with the bright light. But the problem is, they just shoot towards the bright light. The shutters obviously being for more weather protection when the searchlight wasn't on, because when the searchlight was in use, obviously the shutters would have to open up and go back. So there we have number 2 searchlight emplacement, still intact. Number 1 emplacement sadly has been demolished. One of the few parts of this site that has been totally demolished. However, I believe that when this road was built, you can see this road behind us. There wasn't actually a road here during the war when the emplacements were built, but whenever this was built, the government bought up the strip of land, which includes that searchlight emplacement. So that searchlight emplacement, I believe, is owned by the government, as is the battery observation post. But there's an embankment where the number 1 searchlight emplacement is, and I think that's probably when it was demolished. So we're back here at the main part of the battery. So what we're going to look at next, and our last visit in this video, is going to be the battery observation post. It's sometimes hard to think of a better location than some of these battery observation posts. We have here a 2-story, reasonably standard designed battery observation post. The bottom is locked up and has been used for storage, it seems, but we can't get into the top level. And like most of these, one level would have been an observation post for the guns, so effectively a rangefinder and sort of gunnery control officer. And the other level would have been a searchlight director. The searchlights, and I only really understood this recently. So a lot of searchlights were electrically controlled. So instead of having crews with both searchlights having to frantically find a target, the targets, so as to say, the lights could be directed from a location like this electrically. So I think they had essentially pan and tilt, and the crews there were simply to maintain them and operate them and put the carbon rods in, and I suppose open the shutters whenever the shutters needed opened. But that's something I'd like to find out a lot more about. But here we are on the top floor, and we get a great view, as you'd imagine, of number 2 searchlight emplacement, number 2 gun on the left, magazine, number 1 gun to the right. And if we look all the way over here, between us and that first black boat shed is where number 1 searchlight would have been, just there. Some eagle-eyed of you may have noticed we've a hardened Nissen hut just behind the bus shelter. That was engine house number 1. So I believe engine house number 1 would have provided electricity for searchlight emplacement number 1, and engine house number 2 for the second searchlight. So yeah, very interesting site. I was really surprised to find it in such a state of preservation. It was also very fortuitous to to meet the landowner who was just loading up a trailer. When I arrived, got chatting to him, he showed me about and told me a little bit about the history of the site. His family has owned this site, I think, since his grandparents. So perhaps it was handed back to them, or perhaps they owned it at the start of the war when it was requisitioned. And also in Skala Fjord, I'm probably pronouncing it terribly, we had boom defences as well, and I think we had 2 detector loops that would have run out into the entrance of the fjord. And as I say, the escort refuelling base was the upper part of the fjord there. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this and certainly find it as fascinating as I have. Certainly unexpected. I'd seen some photographs from Google Earth. Certainly nobody having visited or recorded the site, so I could get a better impression of what it is. But yeah, absolutely fascinated to find it in such a state of preservation, especially that number 2 emplacement with the plastic armour. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.